and we can begin to heal as a family because this has affected our family so deeply.
Tonight, why a guilty verdict of a convicted killer was almost a mistrial.
So all we're asking Marie is to leave that piece of property and find suitable property within the community.
A Whitefish River First Nation woman says she has a human right to her own piece of land on the reserve.
We fought so hard in trying to find our place, even in the province we created. We've tried to find a home.
And the Manitoba Metis Federation promises a better future for the Red River Metis. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Justice has been served for a Calgary woman and her family after her accused killer was found guilty of first-degree murder. Tamara Pimentel has the details.
The Baptiste family is relieved as 3 years of fighting for justice comes to an end. Curtis Healy was found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of 31-year-old Don's Echoes Baptiste.
Oh, it was just a big relief. It's like, oh my God, because we just didn't think that anything was like this was going to happen. But we turned around, we just made sure that everything, we stood together, we stood strong, we prayed. God answered our prayers.
In 2015, Baptiste's body was found in a backyard in northeast Calgary. The trial heard Healy stomped her head, raped her, and struck her in the head with a large rock. Healy has been sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years.
I'm just so glad that this is finally over and that we all can move on and we can begin to heal as a family because this has affected our family so deeply.
On Friday, Healy's lawyer unsuccessfully asked for a mistrial after learning sequestered jurors went for drinks at a hotel lounge where news coverage of the trial was shown. The 6-man, 6-woman jury ultimately agreed with the Crown on Healy's guilt. Baptiste had 4 children, ages 5 to 13. Her family says before her death, she completed treatment and got a full-time job. Her family says while their lives are changed forever, they now can continue their healing journey and remember Baptiste with dignity. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
For the second time in 3 years, an elder from a Northern Ontario First Nation has been forced to relocate. APTN's Annette Francis tells us more about the struggles of a 65-year-old woman fighting to keep a roof over her head.
This originally was an 8x14 garage, which is converted into a room. Took off the garage door, put on a people door, and I took carpentry 2 years ago, and so I learned to make windows, and I put that in for extra light. This other little room here, this is the sleeping room.
For the past 3 years, Marie McGregor Pitawanakwat has lived off-grid.
I was evicted first from the home I grew up in, and when that happened, I went to an emergency shelter for about 6 weeks, and then I needed to be on my homeland again, so I bought a tent.
Pitawanakwat says her brother was given the certificate of possession for their parents' property after their mother passed away in 2012. After years of legal wrangling, an Ontario Superior Court judge ruled that their certificate of possession was valid. She was evicted from the old homestead. Since then, Pitawanakwat has lived on the outskirts of Whitefish River First Nation. But it wasn't long before more trouble erupted. The property where Pitawanakwat's 250-square-foot home was built is on an old sawmill site and is designated by Whitefish River First Nation as commercial.
The Band Council found out about it, and they decided they were concerned about my health and safety, and so they asked me to leave here.
And a recent Ontario Superior Court order says she has to leave.
The land at that location is designated by the community for commercial. We want to maintain that commercial capability into the future. So all we're asking Marie is to leave that piece of property and find suitable property within the community.
Chief Shining Turtle says leadership has worked with her for a few years to find a solution.
She picked a site. We provided an entrance to that site. We prepared the base for her tiny home, as she calls it, and she turned it down. So we put a lot of effort into that. We spent a lot of money to try and meet her needs. We understood that she didn't want to be in a sort of a semi-urban setting. The rural environment was fine with us, and she said no.
Pitawanakwat has since moved off the property. She says her experience is not hers alone. It's an Indigenous women's human rights issue to secure land tenure on their homelands. According to Chief Shining Turtle, the opportunity for Pitawanakwat to move on to the new location is still open. Anna Francis, APTN National News, Whitefish River First Nation.
We want to hear what you think. Here's how you can continue the conversation. You can send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptn news. You can also follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Indigenous news. The Manitoba Metis Federation says they are another step closer to self-government. Over the weekend, Federal Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett was in Winnipeg to sign an agreement with the MMF and to commit $154 million to, in their words, advance reconciliation. Brittany Hobson brings us more.
You know, it's such a great feeling, and Minister's absolutely right. I can't get rid of my smile right now.
The president of the Manitoba Métis Federation says they are ushering themselves into a new era of self-governance, something that's 148 years in the making. At this year's annual General Assembly, the MMF's David Chartrand signed a joint action plan with Canada.
This is going to change lives. The youth, your future is going to be so different than most of the people in gray hair sitting around this room. We've fought for so long at the local levels. We fought so hard in trying to find our place, even in the province we created. We've tried to find a home in our own province we created.
The three-part plan comes with $154.3 million of funding from Ottawa and builds on the 2016 Framework Agreement for Advancing Reconciliation. Followed a Supreme Court decision in 2013, which saw the federal government fail to honor a land agreement from 1870. Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett said the announcement advances reconciliation efforts between Canada and Manitoba Métis.
Nations shouldn't have to incorporate under some other legislation in order to become a nation, and that's the work that we've been doing, and to make sure that Métis Nation rights are recognized and implemented.
Part of the money will go toward housing, healthcare, and job creation. Education is also included, something that makes Youth Council member Caitlin Sierra Fedori happy. However, she hopes supports for students leaving home will be part of that.
I think because a lot of people are from smaller communities, and you kind of just grow all together, and then lots are scared to leave home.
Chartrand says the agreement with Ottawa will put them on par with the provincial government. The MMF and Canada are still in negotiations on when legislation will be put into place. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
It is a very different start to the work week in the nation's capital, with many government employees and students being told to stay home. The city is recovering from a pair of devastating tornadoes, and thousands of people are still without power. Area residents are picking up the pieces after a powerful twister with wind speeds of 265 kilometers an hour ripped through Dunrobin, about 35 kilometers west of Ottawa's downtown. It then moved on to Gatineau, Quebec. A second, slightly less powerful twister touched down in the South Ottawa neighborhood of Arlington Woods. Well, Alberta has its first ever Indigenous female political party leader. We'll have that story after the break, but first, here's tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting off in the East Coast, we've got 8 in cloud in St. John's, 15 and a little bit of rain in Halifax, 6 in snow in Inukjuak, and 5 in Kuujjuaq, 18 in North-Miranda, Val-d'Or, 18 as well, Montreal, 17 in rain, 22 in rain in London and Toronto, 18 in rain in Ottawa, 20 and cloudy in Sault Ste. Marie, 9 and some rain in Sioux Lookout, 12 and rain in Thunder Bay. 6 Hills Inn at Church with rain. God's Lake has some sunshine at 7. Thompson, Norway House, The Paw, also 7 but cloudy. 11s for Winnipeg, Brandon, and Dauphin. Brandon's the only one getting some sunshine in that mix. Lots of sun in Saskatchewan though. North Battleford and Saskatoon in at 12. Regina 11. 10 in Estevan. 11 in Buffalo Narrows and sunny as well in Meadow Lake, and 12 Orange, rainy though, and 8. Hi and welcome back. The Trudeau government is intent on getting the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion built. It ordered the National Energy Board to look at the impact of increased tanker traffic on killer whales. This comes after an appeals court ruled the feds failed to review how shipping would affect marine life and failed to adequately consult with Indigenous people. Today, Conservative Party leader Andrew Scheer outlined his plans for completing Trans Mountain. Scheer wants Trudeau to appoint a ministerial special representative to complete consultations as soon as possible and expects the project will eventually be approved while avoiding a Standing Rock type protest.
I know people like to conjure up images of that type of confrontation. The people we're concerned about are the thousands and thousands of Indigenous Canadians who want to see these pipelines built, that will see the real economic benefits of these projects going ahead. And we all have to follow the laws, and not any one of us in this country can decide that we're going to ignore court rulings or ignore the laws because we disagree with it. It's important that these consultations are meaningful, that they are dynamic, that they provide for two-way exchanges of information, but that at the end of the day, the goal of this process should be a safe and secure pipeline project. It should not be a tool to simply cancel projects that some people happen to disagree with. So I believe that by having this representative, it's that good faith effort that will stand up for those Indigenous communities that will benefit from these types of projects and will ultimately lead to a better process with an approval that we can say as a government, we executed our duty to consult.
The federal government has given the National Energy Board 6 months to review the Trans Mountain Pipeline and to consider marine traffic issues raised by the Federal Court of Appeal when it quashed Ottawa's approval of the project. Jessica Clogg is a lawyer with West Coast Environmental Law. She joins us earlier from Vancouver to share her legal perspective with APTN's Dennis Ward.
Jessica, thanks for joining us here. What are your thoughts on the federal government's order to the NEB to review the impacts of increased marine traffic?
Well, I have to say that this morning's announcement left me very worried that the federal government still has no plan to deal with the elephant in the room, which is the Federal Court of Appeal's determination that they completely failed to hit the mark on Indigenous consultation with respect to this project. So the announcement this morning that they're going to take steps to fix one of the problems identified by the court, which was the failure of the National Energy Board to deal with the impacts of marine shipping for this project, which will increase tanker traffic in Burrard Inlet sevenfold. Great to see a step being taken, but it looks to me like the federal government simply has no plan to deal with the major constitutional issues with their approval of the original approval of the Trans Mountain project.
And so in your opinion, what would proper consultation with First Nations look like?
Well, I think the starting point is that any process of review and consultation or to obtain consent has to start with dialogue and collaboration with Indigenous nations themselves. The process needs to be designed with them. Secondly, you have a federal government who has made a commitment to the implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and the declaration is clear that the minimum standard for consultation is obtaining the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous nations. And I think that has to be the foundation of any follow-up consultation undertaken by the federal government on the Trans Mountain project.
They've given a timeline of about 6 months here. Is that enough time, in your opinion, for a review?
Well, we have to remember that the step that was announced today is simply to get us to a stage where we may have a National Energy Board report that is legally acceptable in the sense that it even considers marine shipping. But that is just the starting point for that other major issue identified by the Federal Court of Appeal, which was the conduct of the Crown after they had the NEB report in hand. And it is those issues related to the multiple unresolved issues raised by Indigenous nations that still needs to be addressed through a process of dialogue, two-way dialogue, and a consent-based process from my perspective. And so clearly that piece of it, dealing with those unresolved issues, is going to take us far, far beyond this initial period.
Jessica, we'll have to leave it there, but appreciate you taking some time for us here today.
Thank you.
The Green Party of Alberta made history on the weekend by electing an Indigenous woman from Calgary as its leader. Cheryl Chagnon Grey Eyes is the first Indigenous woman to become leader of a political party in Alberta. She defeated leadership hopeful Brian DeHere from Lac La Biche. Chagnon Grey Eyes is an environmental activist who works at the University of Calgary. Elders are now regulars at a Northern Ontario school thanks to a new program that supports students in their learning. We'll have that story coming up, but first, here's the rest of tomorrow's weather. To Northern Alberta we start. 15 for high level, 14 in Sunshine in Fort McMurray. 15 in Red Deer and Calgary and Edmonton, sunny. 17 in Kamloops and Vancouver with sunshine, and Tofino also 17 and sunny. 17 in Sandspit, 18 in Smithers, 14 in Prince George, sunshine in those communities. 11 in Beaver Creek, Dawson City's 12 with some rain, same as Mayo. 6 in Norman Wells with some rain. Fort Simpson got rain in 14, sunnier down south, Fort Laird and Trout Lake 16 and sunny. Fort McPherson's snowing and 0, same with Colville Lake. Tuck is in at -2 with some participation there as well. Cambridge Bay 2 and -2 and snowing. RV at 3 and snowing. Chesterfield 0 with a mix of sun and cloud. Arctic Bay -5. Iqaluit -2 with some snow. Clyde River -3 and some snow. And Iqaluit +3 with a mix of sun and cloud. Welcome back. So who doesn't love bannock fresh out of the oven? Well, the students at Dennis Franklin Cromarty High School certainly do, enjoying some as part of the school's Elders program. Our reporter Willow Fiddler brings us this story.
This is what comfort food at Dennis Franklin Cromarty High School looks like, and you can find it here just about every day. It's part of the school's Elders program, a safe space for students, says head elder John Gagnon.
We treat these young students, these young kids, like our own, and we protect them like our own, like any mother would do, or a parent or a grandmother.
There's 7 elders altogether. Principal Sharon Anjikaneb said providing spiritual care and support is essential to the students' academic success.
But to them, it's a connection to home. It's a connection to their grandparents. And that's really important when you're so far away from home. And it's been weeks, months since you last saw your grandparents or your parents.
There's over 100 students at DFC. Many of them have left their homes and families to come to the city for high school. Bradley Anderson is the deputy chief on the student council. It's his first year at DFC, but he sees the value of the elders room.
Where I used to go to school, I used to always be hungry and starving all the time, and because I never really had money or anything.
It's Julie Adams' first year at DFC too. She said there's a big difference from the public high school she used to go to.
I can just feel that feeling of being home at my grandma's house. Because when I'm at my grandma's, there's always fried bread and her tea on the stove.
One of the realities for students at DFC is getting bad news from back home. This week, it was a youth suicide in one of the communities. Anjikaneb says the elders provide immediate support for the students from the affected community when that happens.
She did a prayer with them. Before she did the prayer, she did a teaching on some of the things that she's learned about dealing with loss.
And then we start cooking right away, because we all know the importance of, when you're cooking for meals. Having food around is a lot of comfort.
It's a comfort that can make a difference for these young people.
These are not my grandparents, but they feel like they are. Each one of them, each elder in here in this room.
Gagnon said all schools should have an elders program.
Even the non-native high school should have an elder. Elder in any culture is a person you can go to. That person has wisdom, that lived the life, and kind of take them on the straight path. You know, give them the right way.
Willow Fiddler, APTN National News, Thunder Bay.
Many of you who have seen the show First Contact on APTN will remember a prisoner named Trina. Participants met her at Buffalo Sage House in Edmonton. She told them a compelling story of what led her to a lengthy sentence for a murder she committed while intoxicated. It was the beginning of her journey to get her life on track. We caught up with Trina to see how she's doing since that was filmed last year. Many First Contact viewers were impacted by this woman.
This is Trina. Trina has agreed to tell you her story. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Jamie Sue.
Trina's been at Buffalo Sage for 13 months. But prior to being admitted, she spent 3.5 years behind bars.
Next to each other downstairs. Nice to meet you again.
It was a tragic path that led her here.
While she appeared in your living room only this month, it's actually been a year since she shared her story with First Contact participants Ashley, Avonlea, and Jamie Sue. She's now sharing her continued journey with APTN National News.
I'm on day parole now. I'm looking for a job. I'm in the process of getting my tickets.
Trina remains at Buffalo Sage Wellness Center, which counsels Indigenous offenders through traditional healing before they're released. When she is, she has plans.
I want to get into construction. Yeah, even just start small and work my way up.
Why construction?
Because, well, I've always had this passion. Like I'm a hands-on person. I like to do hands-on work. It feels rewarding. And
what keeps her eye on the prize?
What is my goal in life? Is to raise 2 strong boys who don't have to walk in shame. They can hold their head up high and be proud of who they are and humble enough to know where they come from.
Trina hopes all the First Contact participants learned something from the people and communities who opened up to share their stories, and that they will share that knowledge with similarly ignorant Canadians. Melissa Ridgen, APTN National News, Winnipeg. Now to a remarkable story of survival out of Indonesia. A teenager has been rescued after managing to survive for 7 weeks at sea, living on nothing but fish and seawater he squeezed from his clothing. The teen was employed as a lamplighter on a wooden fishing hut. Those huts are moored kilometers out to sea. In July, heavy winds ripped the raft loose of its moorings and cast him adrift. He was rescued after using a portable radio to signal a passing ship more than 1,900 kilometers from his original location. That's incredible. That's all the news I have for you this Monday, September 24th. I'm Melissa Ridgen, and I will see you back here tomorrow night. Have a great evening.